Whenever I think about trends in federal mobility, my natural frame of reference is always the digital government strategy, which was released last May, which provided really a one-year roadmap for adopting mobility more into the federal environment. And I think kind of where we've seen the most progress under the digital government strategy are really in two of its elements, one of which is shared platform and the other is security. And so shared platform in the sense of federal agencies coming together to adopt more common solutions for the way in which they embrace mobility. And we've done that within the Department of Justice in the sense of looking to adopt a common mobile device management platform. I think you're seeing evidence of that at GSA, where they're moving forward with federal-wide offerings for mobile infrastructure and mobility services. So I think there's been a lot of trends in the adoption of shared platforms to support mobility. And then the natural complement to that is security, of coming to common understanding of what a secure mobile platform looks like and how do we manage and secure devices and what the common use cases look like for mobility and security across the federal government. So I think we've seen a lot of progress both across the agencies in terms of having more of a dialogue and a common understanding of security across agencies, but also adapting traditional security protocols, processes, infrastructure to better support the mobile environment. Everything from NIST evolving their guidelines for security controls to evolving use cases across the federal government that apply those security controls to meet a particular organization's mission requirements. Naturally, my reference point is the digital government strategy, which kind of, I don't want to say expires, but its deliverable life cycle runs out in May. And so that raises natural questions of, okay, well, what happens after that point? And I think we'd all agree in the federal space that the fundamental tenets of the digital government strategy go well beyond a year. And that while we've been able to accomplish a lot in a year, there's a lot more that remains to be done. So I think what we'll see is an examination of all the things that we accomplished under the strategy and some of the specific deliverables, but then looking at what the gaps were that perhaps those deliverables didn't address for whatever reason. That they're either things we didn't appreciate fully a year ago or things that have developed in the last year that need to be addressed. And so I think we'll see a continuation of those efforts under the guise of the federal government strategy to continue work across the federal government in solving some of these problems as a government, collectively, collaboratively, and working through a lot of those continuing challenges. I think there are probably two specific areas that require attention just because they're the harder aspects of not just mobility specifically, but how we think about delivering services to our users and our employees. And those are in the area of data and how we think about securing data, tagging data, providing access to data, securing data, and then also identity and access management. And how do we extend some of the paradigms that we have today that are very much dependent on coming onto a federal network, extending those paradigms into the mobile environment, out to citizens, and thinking differently about how we provide, again, identity and access management in that broader, more flexible, less enterprise-driven environment. So I think those are the two areas where we'll see a lot of additional work over the next year or so. Some of the lessons learned are common across our individual experience as ATF, as an agency, and also the lessons learned and observations about seeing how the government has addressed this as a whole. One, I'd say, is just the value of pilots and experimentation. We certainly learned that lesson over the last couple of years where we pursued a number of different approaches to mobility, knowing that they weren't necessarily all going to succeed or result in something that was a capability that we rolled out as an enterprise. So, being willing to experiment, being willing to learn from the results of those experiments, which sometimes means discarding the experiment and starting over or going in a different direction. But then, if a lesson has been learned, rapidly scaling it to something that actually can be deployed in our environment to our users to give them additional capabilities. And I think that experience has extended across the federal government in the sense that we are very much receptive to learning from each other. So when an agency has leaned forward, when they've done something innovative, they've done experiments, they've learned lessons, we're very much willing to learn from that and adopt some of that lesson learned, that experience for ourselves, as opposed to having to repeat it for ourselves to learn the same lessons. And I think that's an interesting development that we've seen in the context of mobility that didn't necessarily exist prior to that. I think years ago you'd still see a lot of agencies wanting to kind of go through the same experience of of learning for themselves, even though another agency may have learned similar lessons. In the area of mobility, I think we've seen a lot greater willingness to learn from each other. And that leads to the other related lesson learned or observation I'd share, which is just the value of collaboration as well. We as an organization at ATF are small. We're only about 5,000 employees. We don't have a lot of scale within our organization, and we can be a lot more effective and achieve a lot more economy if we collaborate within the Department of Justice and across the department and look to leverage each other's capabilities, our user base, our economy of scale to be a much more efficient and effective organization. And so we have pursued things like common mobile device management platforms across the department and have been much more aggressive about really looking to work with other components, to find economies of scale, to learn from each other, and to work closely as a department in a lot of these endeavors. And I think you've seen the same trend across the federal government, particularly in the context of the digital government strategy, with the creation of a digital services advisory group and leveraging the federal CIO council. It's been a very collaborative effort where we've recognized the common needs that we all have and some of the common solutions that we can pursue, and that we can more effectively achieve those solutions if we do it collaboratively as opposed to as individual agencies. And I think that is actually a different trend than what we've seen in previous years. I think there is a much more open willingness to collaborate across agencies and to be very much cooperative, collaborative in finding common solutions to some of these challenges that we all face.